Welcome back to CIA Declassified. The year is 1955. The world is a chessboard of shadows, and the United States is locked in a desperate struggle for survival against an enemy that doesn't just want territory, they want the minds and bodies of those who protect it. In this era, the fear of brainwashing and interrogation breakdown was a tangible, terrifying reality, fueled by the return of broken POWs from the Korean War who seemed to have been hollowed out by their captors. The high-ceilinged offices of the agency were filled with a singular, chilling anxiety. The realization that an agent's greatest vulnerability wasn't a lack of information, but a failure of the flesh under extreme duress. The technological gap was closing, and the atomic stalemate meant that the individual operative was now the most critical and most fragile asset in the arsenal. They needed a way to ensure that when an operative was caught behind the Iron Curtain, their body wouldn't betray the mission before their mind could process an escape or a defensive strategy. This wasn't just about fitness. It was about restructuring the biological response to agony. The agency sought to turn the human nervous system into a fortress, seeking out the precise yield point where meat and bone give way to psychological collapse. To do this, they turned to a radical, often brutal series of physical stress protocols designed to simulate the very worst a human being could experience at the hands of a hostile power. This was a laboratory of the soul, where the currency was sweat and the objective was absolute resilience. This is the era of MKROUGH. Why the designation MKROUGH? The reason for the name lies in the internal organizational structure of the agency's Technical Services Division. The MK prefix was the standard identifier for projects under the Technical Services staff, most famously associated with behavioral modification programs. The suffix rough was a literal, unvarnished descriptor used by the project leads to categorize the physical resilience and environmental hardening track. Unlike the chemical or psychological branches, MKROUGH was focused on the rough handling of the human machine, testing how much physical trauma, temperature extremity, and sensory deprivation a biological system could withstand before a complete operational failure occurred. Let's look at the documented reality of what happened in those isolated training camps. This isn't just about survival, it's about the science of suffering. MKROUGH was a specialized project within the broader behavioral research umbrella of the CIA, specifically focused on physical stress and survival training. The program utilized thermal stress chambers to test agent endurance in temperatures ranging from -40 degrees to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Records show the agency conducted high-altitude hypoxia tests to determine the physical impact of oxygen deprivation on cognitive recall. The program integrated mock interrogation scenarios where candidates were subjected to 48-hour periods of standing stress positions. Logs confirmed the use of acoustic stress overload, playing looped high-frequency sounds to test an agent's ability to maintain focus under sensory bombardment. The project operated out of several black sites, including isolated facilities in the Appalachian Mountains. MKROUGH technicians monitored heart rate variability and cortisol levels to create stress threshold profiles for every operative. Documentation proves the program utilized sleep deprivation cycles that lasted up to 96 hours to observe the onset of physical tremors and hallucinations. The agency tested nutritional deprivation rations to see how long an agent could perform high-level tasks on less than 500 calories a day. Records show that MKROUGH consulted with Olympic-level coaches and physiological researchers to refine their hardening techniques. The program included water immersion conditioning to train agents against the effects of hypothermia during maritime insertions. Reports indicate that several candidates suffered permanent physiological injury during the more extreme phases of stress testing. The agency utilized isometric fatigue test, forcing candidates to hold heavy objects for hours to map the point of total muscular collapse. Internal memos describe the goal of the program as, quote, the creation of an unbreakable operative, end quote. The project developed specialized medical monitoring equipment that could be concealed during stress trials. Documentation shows that MKROUGH was part of the transition from traditional survival training to resistance to interrogation doctrine. The program used sensory gating exercises to teach agents how to manually suppress pain signals through intense mental focus. Records prove that MKROUGH researchers analyzed the physiological response to simulated drowning decades before it became a public controversy. The agency utilized Faraday cage isolators to test the effects of total electromagnetic silence on human circadian rhythms and equilibrium. Records confirm that candidates were subjected to rapid pressure change cycles to simulate explosive decompression scenarios in high-altitude aircraft. The program employed centrifuge training to measure the cognitive degradation of personnel under sustained high G-forces. Documentation reveals the use of peripheral vision suppression goggles to test how agents navigate when their sensory input is artificially restricted. The project researchers documented the third-day psychosis phenomenon, where sleep-deprived subjects began to talk to non-existent entities. MKROUGH developed the stress dial protocol, a method for agents to self-regulate their adrenaline spikes through breathing techniques. Reports show the agency collaborated with the Navy to study nitrogen narcosis thresholds for underwater sabotage missions. Internal logs confirm that the agency tested ice slurry ingestion to study the internal cooling rates of the human core during extreme heat exposure. The program utilized weighted treadmill exhaustion tests where agents carried 80-pound packs until they reached a state of exercise-induced collapse. Records show the use of strobe disorientation lights to study how flickering frequencies can disrupt the human inner ear and cause immediate nausea. MKROUGH established the first pain scale database for human subjects, ranking different types of physical trauma by their duration and intensity. Documentation confirms the testing of sensory deprivation tanks where agents were left in total darkness and silence for up to 12 hours. The project monitored the gastric emptying rate of agents under high-stress scenarios to understand how the digestive system shuts down during combat. Records show the agency utilized electromyography to measure muscle tension in agents during mock interrogations to detect signs of impending collapse. The program used simulated combat noise at decibel levels exceeding 120 to test auditory resilience. Logs confirm that MKROUGH technicians used galvanic skin response sensors to track the onset of the fight or flight reflex in real time. The project tested survival psychology by placing agents in solitary confinement with only puzzle-solving tasks to maintain their sanity. Records prove the agency analyzed the bone density loss in agents subjected to long-term immobilization stress test. Reports show that MKROUGH was one of the first programs to study resilience biomarkers in the blood of high-performing operatives. The agency utilized thermal imaging to track the blood flow patterns of candidates being subjected to extreme cold water immersion. MKROUGH developed phonic distraction techniques to help agents shield their thoughts from high-pressure questioning. Records show the agency developed metabolic efficiency profiles to determine which agents could survive longest behind enemy lines with zero support. The project used slant-range acoustics to test an agent's ability to maintain spatial orientation while subjected to disorientating sonic waves. Records confirm the testing of visual persistence thresholds, measuring how quickly an agent can recover from high-intensity light flashes used in breach operations. The program monitored REM cycle inhibition, studying how the lack of dream state sleep affects an agent's logical deduction capabilities. Reports indicate the use of differential pressure boots to simulate walking on various unstable terrains while under heavy physiological load. Internal logs reveal that the agency tested subdermal thermal sensors to monitor internal temperature fluctuations without external equipment during field trials. MKROUGH mapped the adrenal exhaustion curve, identifying the exact moment an agent moves from peak performance into a catastrophic crash state. Documentation proves the use of variable frequency vibration chairs to test the impact of prolonged transport in high noise, high vibration clandestine vehicles. The agency conducted saltwater dehydration trials to map the exact neurological degradation that occurs when an operative is forced to survive at sea without portable water. Records show the use of proprioceptive disruption, where agents were spun and tilted in the dark to see if they could still identify cardinal directions. The program utilized timed logical puzzles administered during extreme physical pain to measure the cognitive drift of agents under torture. Reports indicate that MKROUGH technicians measured the basal metabolic rate of agents in deep freeze conditions to calculate the exact caloric cost of shivering. The agency tested post-traumatic recall by showing agents classified documents briefly before putting them through a high-intensity stress event. Records prove that researchers tracked the leukocyte response in candidates to see how physical stress training impacted the long-term immune system. The project utilized olfactory distraction using nauseating odors during mock interrogations to test if scent could trigger a breakdown. Logs confirm that MKROUGH developed a stress inoculation schedule that is still the foundation for modern special operations assessment. The program experimented with forced hyperventilation to study its effects on an agent's ability to control panic attacks. Documentation reveals the use of cold pressure test, where agents kept their limbs in ice water while reciting complex mathematical sequences. Internal methods prove that the agency studied myocardial stress patterns during simulated executions to determine the heart's literal breaking point from fear. And the project monitored the glucose utilization rate in the brain during prolonged periods of high arousal stress. A quote from a declassified internal review: "The objective is to move the breaking point further into the distance until the mission is complete." A quote from a redacted operative known only as 74-B. "By the third day of the cold room trials, you don't feel the shivering anymore. You just feel the silence of your own nerves." End quote. And a quote from a redacted MKROUGH training officer: "We weren't looking for the strongest man. We were looking for the man who refused to believe his body was failing." End quote. Despite the declassification of the project's existence, the files for MKROUGH are a graveyard of black ink. The most extensive erasures, spanning over 320 pages, occur in the sections titled Biochemical Augmentation During Stress and Long-Term Psychosomatic Follow-Up. The agency maintains these redactions under National Security Exemption B3, citing the protection of intelligence sources and methods that allegedly remain relevant to modern special operations training. Then there is the Chimera Serum Whisper. In the deeper corners of the internet, a persistent theory suggests the redacted pages are actually a diary of super soldier experimentation. Speculators argue the agency wasn't just testing natural resilience, but was injecting candidates with experimental anabolic neuromodulators designed to shut down the fear response at a hormonal level. The theory suggests these drugs created a temporary state of biological invulnerability, but left the veterans with irreversible neurological damage that the agency is still covering up. Then there's the genetic selection shadow rumor. It's a darker one, and it concerns a eugenics-based selection process hidden behind the black bars. Analysts suggest the agency used MKROUGH to identify specific hardening genes, effectively attempting to breed a specific class of human for intelligence work. This theory posits that the blacked out pages contain the genetic profiles of the most successful candidates and their descendants who might still be monitored by a silent shadow registry today. Then there is the memory anchor myth. It's a psychological conspiracy that involves a technique called pain memory erasure. Speculators believe the redactions hide a method where intense physical trauma was used to lock specific classified information into a part of the brain that could only be accessed under a specific physical trigger or another high-stress event. This would mean the information was literally beaten into the agent's subconscious, making it impossible to reveal under standard interrogation because the agent wouldn't even consciously know they possessed it. Then there is the artificial hive hypothesis. Some theorists go even further, suggesting the redactions hide the first experiments in neural telemetry. They speculate that MKROUGH wasn't just testing the body, but testing the body's ability to act as an antenna for remote commands. The theory argues that the agency was attempting to develop a way to pilot agents through stress-induced dissociative states, using the physical trauma as a way to break open the mind for external control, a precursor to modern brain-computer interface research. And then there's the transhuman hibernation conspiracy. It's a bit wilder. It's regarding a suspended animation experiment. Speculators claim the blacked out pages detail a method to artificially lower the human core temperature to near-death levels while maintaining brain activity, allowing agents to be transported in cargo-like conditions for long-duration insertions. The theory suggests that MKROUGH was trying to solve the problem of human metabolism during long-range covert transportation, effectively turning agents into biological cargo that could be awakened upon arrival at the target site. Was MKROUGH a success? Tactically, it was a scientific breakthrough. The agency successfully mapped the physiological red line of human endurance, providing a data-driven foundation for all future elite military and intelligence training. Strategically, it was a moral quagmire. While it produced hardened operatives, the program's brutal methods led to significant internal blowback and physical casualties that the agency spent decades trying to hide. Ultimately, it was a success because it defined the SER doctrine, S-E-R-E, the survival, evasion, resistance, and escape protocols used by the modern military, and those are a direct descendant of the MKROUGH trials. It successfully proved that the human body could endure far more than previously believed, provided the mind was conditioned to accept the trauma. It established that resilience is a trainable skill, not just an innate trait. However, the success is clouded by the realization that once you break a man to make him stronger, he is never truly whole again. The program succeeded in creating the iron will, but it often did so by shattering the human being inside. The metrics for success in this project were measured in the survival rates of agents in hostile territory, which reportedly rose by 40% following the implementation of these protocols. It also succeeded in identifying that psychological grit could be predicted by specific biometric markers, a discovery that saved the agency millions in recruitment costs. Finally, the project was a success because it gave the agency a psychological edge. Enemies knew that catching a CIA operative did not mean they would talk. As far as operational and technological breakthroughs go, the Brawn and Belief of MKROUGH resulted in breakthroughs that define elite performance today, such as stress inoculation training, SIT, the method of exposing subjects to low-level stress to build immunity to high-level trauma. Today, this is the gold standard for training first responders and combat medics to perform complex tasks under fire. Hyperbaric recovery protocols. The research into high pressure and temperature manipulation affects cell recovery. This technology is now used in elite sports medicine to accelerate the healing of professional athletes after injury. Controlled hypoxia conditioning, the science of maintaining cognitive function in low oxygen environments. This is a foundational element of aerospace physiology used to train pilots and astronauts for high altitude missions. and biometric resilience modeling, the use of real-time data to predict when a human being will break. This is used today in the development of wearable health tech for extreme environmental workers and deep-sea divers. MKROUGH reminds us that the most powerful weapon in the agency's arsenal isn't a satellite or cipher. It is the human spirit, forged in the most brutal conditions imaginable. The program proved that the limit of our strength is often a choice, not a biological boundary. We are still living in the world of the iron will, where the lessons learned in those dark mountain camps dictate how we train our heroes and how we define endurance. The water is still cold and the heart is still thumping, but because of this project, we know exactly how many beats it can take before it stops. We have mastered the art of survival by studying the anatomy of the breaking point. This project turned the vulnerability of the flesh into the strength of the state. It ensured that the silence of an operative was as loud as a nuclear deterrent. We didn't just learn how to survive the cold, we learned how to make the cold a part of the uniform. The legacy of these trials is the unshakable certainty that the body serves the mission, no matter the cost. Thanks for listening. Keep your body strong and your secrets safe. And remember, the fire doesn't just consume. If you're strong enough, it tempers. Join us next time as we examine Project Krypton. In the thin air of the Himalayas, the CIA didn't just plant sensors, they planted nuclear seeds. We'll uncover the facts behind Project Krypton, the program to miniaturize nuclear batteries for long-term surveillance. It was a war of power and presence. Join us next time for The Eternal Ear. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.